Good evening. The board reconvenes in open session. Items to report from closed session. Claim RMA 001740 was denied with a vote of 7-0. A motion by trustee Cervantes and a second by trustee Solis. Our next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice President Paul.
Please join me in salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our next item is presentation reports. And first we will hear from Central Unified Teachers Association.
She is coming online now.
Great. As we wait for Ms. Martinez to join us, just a reminder to the public, if you wish to address the board on any item not on the agenda at the moment, the call-in number is 559-276-3150. If you wish to address the board on any agenda items, please, we just ask that you wait till that agenda item is called, and you can also call in to 559-276-3150. Thank you. Ms. Martinez, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Board Trustee Carrillo, and good evening to all of you, and good evening to our superintendents as well. First of all, I want to preface what I'm going to say. So as you know, tomorrow is California Day of Teacher, and most of the nation, I believe, has been celebrating it all week, but it's officially, and officially with our district as well, thank you, tomorrow is the actual day. And I'm going to use the word educator when I say Happy Educator Appreciation Day, because our educators include not just our teachers, but our speech therapists, our counselors, our certificated librarians, our coaches, our reading intervention teachers, our psychologists, and our counselors. So when I say educator, I want to be sure that we're including all of them. So I'm just going to read you a little something that we did for our teachers this year that I think that you will really appreciate. Kuda would like to recognize the work that our members are doing. Together, we are charting new territory in education, creating new innovative lessons, and making sure our students are getting nothing but the best. You are inspiring generations to come. Under normal circumstances, Kuda purchases a gift for each of you in appreciation for all of your hard work. And this year, Kuda site rep suggested this gift could make a bigger impact as a donation to our community to continue to ensure our students' health and well-being. A donation of $5 per every Kuda member, plus an additional donation by our own Kuda treasurer, Bernice Hernandez, of her entire stipend that she receives for treasurer, was donated to Highway City Community Development, also known as the Granville Teague Community Resource Center. I know you know that very well. We donated a total of $5,690, but we were also able to partner with Give Help Now, which is a group of generous Fresno area anonymous donors. And Give Help Now promised a 100% match of our donation. That's $11,380. We are definitely building on the best, and we are definitely stronger together. So, and I'd like to also thank our administrators. I know we did celebrate that, and for everything that they're doing. Everyone right now is going above and beyond, and we are so thankful for everything that everyone is doing. I think you guys talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, our classified staff that are on the front line. So we appreciate and thank everyone. Thank you and good night. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Our next item, Superintendent and Board Communications, Superintendent Alvarado.
Yes, thank you, President Carrillo. Just a point of order. Do we want to go back and we need to report out the certificated report that was approved in closed session?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. I apologize for that. Yes, the certificated personnel report was approved 7-0 with a motion by trustee Cervantes and a second by trustee Atkins. Thank you.
Thank you, President Carrillo. Members of the board and staff and also our community who's joining us virtually this evening. Good evening. Thank you, President Martinez, for recognizing our teachers this week. As she mentioned, the several districts around us were starting to recognize our teachers last week, and we did get a little bit of feedback from on social media. But just a little history. Central Unified has always followed the California Department of Ed's recommendation of recognizing the teachers during the California Day of the Teacher, and that happens to be this week on the 13th. Just a little bit of factual history here. The California Day of the Teacher arose out of legislation that was co-sponsored by the California Teachers Association and also the Association of Mexican American Educators. It was Senator Joseph Montoya who wrote the legislation and brought that forward, actually wrote the bill, and it was adopted in 1982. California has patterned the celebration after the traditional Dia del Maestro festivities observed in Mexico and also in other Latin American countries. So, we do recognize the Day of the Teacher. We follow that guidance from the California Department of Ed, and again, that falls on May the 13th, which is this Wednesday. In addition to that, next week we have our Classified Employee Appreciation Week. We'll be recognizing them as well. Well, we're actually recognizing all the staff this week, but officially Classified Staff Appreciation Week is next week. Last week was our nurses week, if you will, and we recognized our nurses. But the certificated staff is vast, so I don't want to make it sound like we're just recognizing our teachers. There's so many folks that fall within that certificated category, and we want to thank them all for all the hard work that they do for our kids and our community. There has been a little bit of confusion regarding the graduation or some questions that have been asked. I do want to clarify that, I think it's everybody's wish that we would have a traditional graduation ceremony for our kids. I think that's everybody's desire, and if we were able to do that, we would do that tomorrow. Okay. The reality is that we're following the guidance from the Department of Health and also from the state. And having folks gather in mass quantities is just not an option for us. Whether we want to do that or not, it's not going to be allowed. Okay, we've been told that by the Department of Health. It's been highly discouraged, not just discouraged. It's been, that's not going to happen, and don't plan on it. And so what we've been doing is we're planning a virtual graduation that we will air on June 11th via our social media and also through PBS. It will be aired at 7 p.m. on that day. In addition to that, we have secured the Save Mart Center August the 13th, hoping that maybe we may be able to convene our students in person and have a traditional graduation ceremony in August. And just in case that is a possibility, we are preparing now to make that happen for our kids. And so, let's keep our fingers crossed that we're able to do that and allow our students to actually experience a traditional graduation ceremony, because as I mentioned earlier, that's everybody's desire. I personally I'm going through some hard times myself. I have my twins are seniors this year, and they're graduating from high school. And one of my daughters is graduating with the highest honors in her class, and we feel a little stripped as well. And so I'm not insensitive to that. We are experiencing it. It is very real. I understand the frustration and the angst and even sometimes the anger that's out there regarding the situation that we've been dealt. But we're going to do the best that we possibly can. We're going to make this a very positive experience for our kids. And we've been planning for the past month and a half as to what this is going to look like. So, I do want to thank our student leaders who have been involved in this process from the very beginning, who came to the board meeting, the last meeting, and gave our board 4 options to consider. and we're actually running with the options that they brought forward. It just doesn't, it's just not going to be the traditional approach to graduation this year. I also want to thank our secondary folks, our staff, administrators, advisors, teachers, for their hard work and brainstorming and been working diligently to put together a graduation that is going to be meaningful for our kids, and also for our middle school folks who are planning on promotion ceremonies as well. There'll be more information on this item later on the agenda. There is a COVID-19 update to the board. What item is that, Mrs. Davis?
Sorry, I was on mute. That will be M2.
That's under information on M2. So if you want to stick around and listen to that that particular item, there will be more information in greater detail regarding graduations and the like. That is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Alvarado. Are there any board members wishing to speak at this time? Hearing no further comments, I just want to remind everyone in our community and including our board members that the Janessa Ramirez event is currently happening, and there will be a live Facebook event. Please make sure you go and follow at Foundations for Central. If you haven't ordered your dinner, please order your dinner, support the foundation and this great event. And there's also a virtual auction that you can participate. So just make sure that you go check out those items. Moving forward to our next agenda item, comments from the public. Do we have any members of the public wishing to address the board at this time? And just a reminder, for those of you wishing to address the board, you will have 3 minutes, at which time, when your time ends, there will be a ringtone that will go off. So if you can please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
President Carrillo, I do have a caller right now. I'm going to put her up to the speaker, if that's okay, if you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, let me put you on speaker. Give me 1 second. Okay, you can speak and address the board now.
Hello, Central Unified board members. My name is Japreet Singh, and I am a 4th grade student at River Bluff School. I love Central Unified. I feel it in my veins. When I heard that Central Unified was considering naming the new high school after Jaswant Singh Kalra, it filled my heart with happiness and excitement. For many of us in Central Unified, even though we love it, we get tired of the bullying, the constant harassment, and never seeing ourselves in the school district. I know they are beginning to promote Punjabi, and that's a big change from before. Naming the high school Jaswant Singh Kalra High School will be a historic name that will fill students with pride, joy, especially after they learn who he is. After I learned about him, I became full with love, admiration, and courage for a person that was willing to tell the truth no matter what the consequences was. That's the leadership we all need, and we hope all of you will be leaders in making this decision. Thank you for letting me have this chance to let me talk and give you a speech about Jaswant Singh Kalra and his leadership.
Thank you so much for speaking to our board. We really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We are at
So just a friendly reminder for those viewers viewing us on our YouTube channel, if you wish to address the board at this time under our public comments, so not specific to any agenda item, you can reach our board members currently at 559-276-3150.
President Carrillo, we do have another person calling right now. I'm going to introduce them. Go ahead and speak to the board.
Okay. Hi, my name is Veerpal Dillon, and I am a parent of a student that goes to River Bluff, and we are very excited to share our thoughts on naming the new high school, Jaswant Singh Kalra High School. Jaswant Singh Kalra gave his life fighting for human rights of all people. even when he was threatened and knew what the consequence was going to be. This name will help instill bravery, compassion, and justice, which are all values all Americans share worldwide. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
President Carrillo, we do have another a person who's calling right now. So let me put them up. You can address the board now.
Thank you, board, for taking time to listen to me. I wanted to suggest the name for the new high school to be Jaswant Singh Kalra. As you know, that Victoria Park used to be called Victoria, but now it's also named Jaswant Singh Kalra. So I would like to continue this trend of supporting this person with having his name in the high school. He was a civil rights activist that helped illegal prosecutions of many Sikhs in India. And during as a community, we had rough times during the early 90s. So a lot of us left India to avoid this kind of injustice. So to us, it's a really important figure that he helped so many people escape injustice. And so me as a part of the Sikh community and Punjabi community here in Fresno, it would be a really great honor if you guys could name this high school as Jaswant Singh Kalra. And that way people kind of remember his name and identity.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
President Carrillo, I'm going to put someone else who's calling right now also about the high school.
Thank you.
You can address the board now.
Hi, I'm an 8th grade student from Rio Vista Middle School, and I can't share with you in words how amazing it would be to have the new school named after Jaswant Singh Kalra, because I've never really seen faces like mine or names like mine represented in the United States. So to have a school named after a human rights hero like him would fill me and so many other Central Unified students with pride and love that we're actually a part of America and that we are truly Americans.
Thank you.
So at this time, there's no other calls. No other calls from the public.
Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda. We have a request to pull items K2 and K4 from our consent agenda by Trustee Cox. With respect to the rest of the items, what are the wishes of the board?
Excuse me, President, I'm only going to be pulling K2.
Okay, thank you. So with respect to K1 and K3 through K4, what are the wishes of the board?
Motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion by Trustee Cox and a second by Trustee Solis. All those in favor, please say aye or communicate your approval. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Item K2, Trustee Cox.
Hi, I just had a couple of quick questions on the change order for Madison. I was questioning first on the district added scope of work regarding 2 drinking fountains. And I just wanted to know if the district can explain why those were not on the original bid and what constitute bringing 2 new fountains forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have Joseph Martinez on the line here, our Director of Facilities, just to address the question. So the first question had to do with the kindergarten drinking fountains.
Yeah, there was 2 additional fountains added. They were both for the kinders. One was in the classroom and one is probably one of the hallway ones. And my question overall is just why was it not in the original modernization plan? What did we find out or why we needed to add this to as a change order?
Okay. Joseph, are you there? Okay.
Yeah, hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, they can.
Okay, so the reason why we added additional drinking fountains to the kinder area only, the ones that are spec'd out on the drawings are ADA compliant. However, sometimes the ADA compliant drinking fountains are not low enough for some of these shorter kindergarten students to reach. So this is for the kindergarten students, so it's easier for them to access drinking fountain. So it's at a manageable height for them. As to why it was not included on the drawings, I can't really answer that thoroughly. I wasn't around when the drawings were designed, but I can probably assume that they just assumed that that height would be acceptable. The original ones that were ADA approved.
So thank you. That's a thank you for that description. My comment would be is going forward in our biddings for other modernizations in school, if we could just make it a policy that in our bid specs that the architect is designing our kindergarten wings to be appropriate, because right now this added another $16,000 to our construction cost. So I think it should be part of the original bid. So I think for policy, if this is going to be a continual architectural drawing thing, that our ultimate goal is to get 0 change orders, of course, which would never happen. But for things like this, if it's repetitive and we're going to have that issue every time, it would be a good policy to draw up in our bid specs that we, our architects and our engineers take into consideration the kindergarten wings.
Yeah, Terry, you're exactly right. These are some of the items that we document, and as we go through the future projects, we definitely take these into consideration. Yeah, you're 100% right. We have these things marked down. We address them as we go forward.
Okay, and then my second question was regarding the rerouting the existing gas pipe at the kitchen. So that seems like it was unseen for condition. I can see that. Do you know why those? Did we do some modernization there that didn't get recorded into, because if the architect or the should have been able to see where our pipelines were. So what was the surprise, or how was the surprise? Did we do some modernization that didn't get recorded into the plans? And then at what point did we know that this was a problem?
Yeah, you're right. There's the as-built drawings that we have for that site. None of them identified that gas line going in there. I'm not sure why. Just inaccurate as-builts. We found it. So years ago, we purchased a GPR equipment for utility locating. We also sometimes hire an outside third-party company to do utility locating for us as well, to identify all these things so that when the contractor starts construction, he doesn't hit gas lines and electrical lines, irrigation lines, and things like that. That is when it was identified. Going forward, we have been more diligent in having these as-built submitted, so things like this don't pop up in the future. We also have architects and engineers document things as construction takes place to make sure that everything is documented thoroughly and we have an accurate as-built set.
Okay, great. And the last question I had on this one was, what % are we at the construction? Are we at 50% yet on the project, or less or more?
Yeah, we're more. We're about 70%, about 75%. We're on the home stretch now. There's still, old sites with a lot of problems. So there are some issues that we are facing, but we're seeing the silver lining in the shutdown and trying to take advantage of it, like in this expediting the project.
Okay, perfect. So if you're at 75%, I'm going to say a great job then, because we still have an adequate remaining balance in our contingency. So that's a good thing. I appreciate that. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. No problem.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Trustee Cox. And with that, what are the wishes of the board on K2?
I'll motion to approve.
Thank you. I have a motion by Trustee Cox. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second by trustee Paul. All those in favor, please say aye or communicate your support. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item L1, adopt resolution 1920-56, suspending and modifying grading policies for spring 2020 semester and high school graduation requirements for seniors scheduled to graduate in June 2020. Ms. Davis?
Thank you, President Carrillo. Attached to the agenda item is the resolution 1920-56, and it's being presented and recommended in order to address our temporary one semester practices, both addressing modification of grade policies, which I did go over the last meeting, but also outlines modifications to our current board policy 6146.1 on high school graduation requirements. Just in terms of a quick review, the grade policies that were outlined are currently available to our parents on the COVID resource page and have been shared out to schools as well. The modifications include assigning incomplete or complete marks in place of end of year grades for students in TK through 8th. At the high school level, the modifications are aligned to the guidance of the CDE and also the colleges and what they will allow for our students pursuing college. The end of year grades will be assigned and can increase from their 6-week mark. Students not meeting the minimum expectations for a course that were not meeting it at the 6-week mark would be assigned a no credit. And then those meeting the minimum expectations but not advancing their grade to an A, B, or C would receive a pass, which is acceptable to both college universities and community colleges. The high school graduation requirements that you updated October 22nd, 2019 are the second part of this resolution. At the time that we brought it in October, you may recall we discussed that our local graduation requirement does exceed other districts in the state requirement by 40 to 50 credits. We certainly want to honor the hard work and efforts of our students to fulfill the graduation requirements and to meet the expectations that have been put forth by this board. However, we also recognize that currently they are in circumstances of teaching themselves for this semester with support of their teachers, but not going at it in the same way that they typically will their last semester of their senior year. We want to mitigate the negative impact for our current seniors that they may have in completing their coursework. So this resolution identifies or essentially suspends and modifies that current graduation requirements only for the current seniors of class of 2020 and only for this, this last year, not to be added on to other grade levels. As noted in the resolution, the request in here of modification is that our comprehensive central high school campuses are allowed to have a transcript review and utilize the waiver process that is in our board policy, moving them from a 280 credit requirement to 240 credits, not allowing the waiving of any state requirement or UC CSU requirement. We still want them to stay on track for that. In addition to that, class independent school is independent study is already set up to be learning in this current situation of distance learning. However, for the period of time from school closure on March 13th until the week following spring break, the students were in a mode of review and not earning credits. And so we would like to honor that period of time they were unable to earn credits. And as such, in the recommendation, you will see a change of 10 units of credit that they could have earned during that period of time. That's why theirs is different. Alternative schools such as Pershing and Pathway also follow their credits like the comprehensive school site and would also still be meeting the state requirements under this resolution. But we do believe these regulations are appropriate for us to extend to our current seniors. And following any questions you have, we do recommend that this resolution be adopted by our board.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Before I take any questions or comments from the board, do we have any comments from the public? Ms. Dosti, can you confirm whether we have any comments from the public? Hearing no response, I will assume that we do not. Ms. Dostie, do we have any comments from the public on this item?
We do not, President
Okay.
Correa.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Trustee Cox?
I just have a real quick one for you, Mrs. Davis. So I just wanted clarification. I'm glad to hear there's an alignment with the colleges, but I wanted to just give a scenario and just kind of understand. So we have some of our students who may be in, say, an AP class, and they're in their last semester. We're dropping the credits on that. So how does that look when they get into college? And then also on the flip side of that, if we have some students that maybe be in calculus 1 or something like that, are they going to need to retake that when they get to college because they didn't quite finish? I know they get the credit, but they didn't quite finish the course, may not be ready to go on to the second the leg of the calculus. So how does that work for the ongoing seniors? I guess it's more pertinent towards, or maybe
So-
not. Junior might be in the same situation a year later, but okay.
So the way the grading cycle, that your questions span both parts of this resolution, the grading and the graduation requirement. The graduation requirement is the waiver for that already exists in the board policy will only be utilized for a student who is unsuccessful at completing during this term, during school closure, that might need a course waived. The 2 courses you mentioned are required courses. They probably wouldn't be the ones waived. The student would instead be enrolled in summer school to finish that course. The waiver would be for courses that are above and beyond the required courses that are unique to our school district, and where we have 5 courses offered for history, let's say, and the state might require 3. That would be, or some of our electives are above and beyond. In terms of what the impact is when the student moves on to college, we were really careful in the grading criteria to make sure we aligned and made sure any student, including a sophomore or a junior right now, would be able to move their credits towards college. The use of a pass for a student when they meet minimum expectations would be allowable and would not require a student at this time, as the CSU and UCs have described, would not require a student to take that class over. They would have credit for it. If a student is in an AP class and already getting an A, B, C, nothing changes for them. Their transcript still is read the same way it has been in past years. We wouldn't change any of that. We just want to acknowledge for some students, their success might have been dependent on being with a teacher face-to-face for these last 8 to 9 weeks of school. And since we cannot do that, we wanted to be able to exercise the waiver.
Okay, and I just wanted to reiterate too, so like using the classic, say calculus 1, that last 9 or 10, 12 weeks is covering a certain content that they're not going to ever be able to recover unless, and 2, I guess 2 would be review class. So I wanted to make sure if those are the students that we're going to be sending to summer school maybe to finish, or they're going to get, okay, not necessarily.
If they receive no credit, then we probably already have them connected to the extra support. And the teachers are still providing instruction on the key and critical standards. I believe, I have not spoken directly to how they'll mitigate it, but the UC, CSU are going to be in the same position we are when we start up. Again, having to analyze and do some formative checking with students to find out where the gaps are. I can't speak for the colleges in terms of what they might do, but I do know that they have moved away from remedial coursework in entry level for classes. So I would expect, like us, that the instructors would have to do some adjustment and create some supports for them. In the meantime, I think our teachers have done a really good job of identifying what the essential standards would be for the end of the year of course, and are trying to make sure students have time to practice it. But I know it's not the same as being in school.
Okay, and the last question was, so are we expecting or anticipating a higher enrollment in our summer schools? And maybe Mr. McLean's going to be discussing that later on, but are we going to be ready for that? That would be my question.
I will, during the item on the COVID updates, mention summer school more, but to answer your question, I don't expect different numbers right now in our review. We're looking pretty similar. and to what we've had in prior years of courses needing to be retrieved and actually have some plans to extend how many weeks we could offer it. So we might be able to get ahead and give some students some more options this summer.
Thank you.
Trustee Paul?
Yeah, I understand. I think I understand the resolution and the information you just provided. But I gotta imagine that if I'm in school and I'm working really hard because that's either my habit or because I've determined that I want to do better, it's got to be a little discouraging for some kids. How are we addressing that? I mean, does that come up?
Discouraging in terms of mental health, discouraging in terms of academics. I think we're anticipating both of those, and schools are triaging when the teacher feels that their support or communication with the student might not be enough. They're reaching out to a psychologist or a counselor who are providing or fulfilling a role to support that student as well. I think people are trying to find ways to encourage students. I think our policies and our communication out are for that purpose. And we can't do it enough. We've got to be available to continue to let them know that this is a very unique time and stay engaged. And our policy is positive in the front that what they had going in on the 6 weeks can't be ruined over these periods of week where they might be facing different challenges than they've ever faced before. But it also can give them a chance to continue to work hard and be rewarded for that by an improvement in grade that certainly is available. We are concerned about mental health for our students and for our parents and our community as well. This is a trying time. And so we are trying to tap into all of our community resources, all of our entities that are, we have contracted this year for services are continuing to work and continuing to reach out to students. So I guess I would just say, if we know of a student that is expressing concern, or if we know of a student who's really struggling, ask them who their, a teacher that they feel comfortable talking to is, have them reach out to that teacher, or you alert us if there's someone that you might be concerned for, so we can help explain or answer their questions. Maybe they have a specific example like Trustee Cox just did, where, they want to know how it relates to their circumstance. So let us help them with that.
Thank you. Are you seeing those types of interactions?
You bet, regularly and often.
And seeing some success in dealing with whatever issues come up?
We have a lot of students continuing to receive services that were prior to going to break, and a handful of referrals, as well as I know teachers are regularly checking in. I think there's a balance. They're giving support to both the parents and the students right now, which typically it's to the student, but there have been a lot more call in from parents seeking assistance as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing nothing further, what are the wishes of the board on this item?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. I have a motion by Trustee Solis. Is there a second? I have a second by Trustee Singh. All those in favor, please, he beat you to it, Mr. Cervantes. All those in favor, please say aye or communicate your support. Any opposed? I'm sorry, Trustee Cox, was that in opposition or was that? Okay, just making sure. Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries 7-0. Item L, thank you, Ms. Davis. Item L2, hold a public hearing and approve the 2021 negotiation contract openers for the Central Unified Teachers Association, CUDA, NEA Chapter 961, and Central Unified School District. Mr. Collegian.
Thank you, President Carrillo. This item returns to you from our previous board meeting, again in compliance with Government Code Section 3547. A public hearing must be held prior to adopting the initial proposals from both CUTA and Central Unified, ultimately affording an opportunity for the public to be informed and to provide input. This evening, administration is recommending that the board hold a public hearing at this time and then following the public hearing, closing of the public hearing, apologies, to adopt the contract openers from both parties. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Trustee Cox?
Sorry, I just had a question for staff, and I just wanted to know if this item is pertinent, that it has to be heard today and acted on. One of the things I would like to see if staff can recommend and let us know is we're kind of in a really fluctual situation right now. We're going to know a little bit more at the next meeting after the May revise. Would it be wiser to not limit our openers until we've kind of known budget-wise what's coming in? That's my only question to staff.
I think between both CUTA's openers and our openers, and knowing that the contract is wide open, whether a particular article is not sunshine tonight, the CBA does allow for one party to open up a different article that has not been sunshine to discuss and bargain as well, if that does play a role into it. I think would be okay there, President Cox, in the event that we have to do that. But I think your point is well taken. I think information we glean from the May revise and what our budget will look like as we open the next school year will certainly play a significant role in this process and other district functions as well.
Okay, and so like if we do, Mr. Gleason, if we say, whether it be on either side that they want to do an opener, tell me, going to basically on an opener, sometimes if once we open it, it's open for both sides, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that would be the maybe the downside of waiting to add, because then it opens it up, and it may be just my point is that if it's not urgent today, would it be detrimental to hold it off until after the budget is May revise is presented?
Are you, Trustee Cox, are you referring to salaries and benefits specifically, or because those are openers, right?
Right, and there's a couple things in there. And I don't, because we've not had any information about what needs to be negotiated. But for example, the 4 openers that are given, class sizes might be impacted by our budget. It's one of the openers. We may be looking at retirements differently. There might be a need to encourage retirement versus layoffs. That's not on here. So it would mean we would have to do an opener. And sometimes when you open it up after this public hearing, you have to negotiate that to get on the table. And sometimes it costs us more then than it does to put it in here now. So I was just wanting to not tie our hands until we had the full picture. Right now we have an idea going forward, but we don't have the full picture of what could be coming. And maybe we won't have it up for the May revise, but we'll probably have a better picture. So that's my only point in even bringing the conversation up. I have no issue with the articles that have been represented. I'm just concerned with closing it now. If it's not necessary, and it might be a necessary adjustment after we get more information. And that was it.
I guess the question is it time sensitive?
I'm sorry, Alvarado, was that for me?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the question is whether or not this item is time sensitive or not.
I think, speaking of the process itself, I don't know that it will hurt us to open the public hearing and glean input from the public and accept the openers. I say that because in the event that, let's speak to golden handshakes or early retirement incentives, there's already provisions in the CBA currently under Article 17 that addresses that process. And if we have to engage that, whether we're, I suppose, in bargain or not, that does allow for, if we do have to go down that road, to use the provisions in Article 17 to do those things. I don't see an issue in terms of it being time sensitive. I think if there's anything that we need to bargain above and beyond the current articles that are sunshine, I think those can be brought to the table to be discussed, but ultimately it's it's the board's decision to decide whether or not to postpone this process. I personally feel that it would be okay moving forward, and we wouldn't jump right into bargaining right away, knowing until what's after in front of us and with the May revise anyhow. So, and we've had those discussions early with CUTA. on what that would look like when we begin the process.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Trustee Paul?
Yeah, Mr. Collegian, thank you for the information. However, I'd have to agree. There are so many uncertainties at this point. If there's not a significant difference in waiting one board meeting, it may be beneficial to do that. I think that's just my opinion, just so that we've got maybe a little bit more solid ground to stand on as far as understanding before we open these up. That would give everyone an opportunity to revisit if they needed to see if other things gain importance as far as items to consider. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, Trustee Paul. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Collegian, so what would be the impact? Do we need to renotice the public hearing if the board decides to table this item to the next board meeting?
Well, I don't know that we'll have any issues with timelines. I think our CBA says that we are to begin bargain after sometime in May, to open the bargain sometime in May after sunshines have occurred. Now, if we were to delay this and push it to the next meeting, I guess the question is, would our articles that we are interested in opening change? That really is the question. Would our openers change after the May revise? I don't know that would be the case today. I think you're looking at both sunshines. If there's anything above and beyond we want to bargain outside of Article 7, 8, 19, and 29, we can revisit that at that time and update our openers if we like. And having said that, CUTA would have that very same right if they decide to pull their openers and add to them or take away from them. I suppose that's allowable too. What we do, we just bring it right back to action to hold a public hearing if necessary. So the impact isn't, I don't know that it hurts us one way or the other. I feel comfortable moving forward knowing that if we need to press pause and identify what our financial situation is as we're getting into bargaining, not only have open dialogue with the Board of Trustees, but also open dialogue with our associations, knowing exactly what our position is. Sometimes articles that don't have obvious financial implications to them have financial implications to them, and we just got to be mindful of that as we go into bargain. I think we're all very understanding of the uncertainty in front of us. I think I can say that. So,
Thank you. Okay, so Trustee Cervantes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Collegian, I kind of feel like I don't want to kick the can down the road, but at the same token, I think the question is being posed, and I think you already answered it. We're not compromised one way or the other in your opinion.
No, we're not. We can push it out and we'll be perfectly fine if that's the wishes of the board.
Or we move forward and it would be perfectly fine in your opinion.
I think so, yes.
So holding the public,
Consensus of the board.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cervantes, I started to speak over you. Can you just repeat your comment?
No, I apologize. I spoke out of turn. I actually, my opinion is to go with the consensus of the board. I mean, I see their point, but at the same token, I also support staff. And, you know, if it's that important to that many board members, then I feel like that we should respect their wishes. But I've only heard from 2 at this point. So I'm just kind of curious how other people feel.
Do the rest of the board members wish to share or provide?
Madam Chair, I'm for moving forward. I mean, our position in negotiation is not going to be hurt one way or the other, and that way we can start this process. So my suggestion would be to continue to move forward.
Thank you, Trustee Solis. Any other comments?
I mean, if sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think if I have a feeling, obviously the negotiating groups obviously know probably things are in the air as well, but if it's the wishes of the board to just get a little bit more time to understand, I'm okay with that.
I did share the concerns with whether we would have additional concerns in addressing or even identifying additional openers after the May revise. However, staff has stated that they don't anticipate that that'll change, given that we have 1 yes, 2 no's, and 2 that seem to go either way. If there is no impact and it will to the public hearing or to our contract, then at this time I would request that there be a motion made to continue both the public hearing and the item to the next board meeting. Trustee Cox?
I'll make the motion to continue to our next meeting after the May revised report.
Thank you. Is there a second? I have a second by Trustee Chan. All those in favor, please say aye or communicate your support. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Did I capture everyone's votes? Trustee Cervantes, I apologize. I don't think I saw what you voted. In abstaining, or was that?
I voted in favor of the motion.
Okay. So I have 5 yeses and 2 nos. Motion carries, and this item will be continued to our next board agenda, at which time we will hold both the public hearing and have a vote on the accepting the openers.
President Carrillo?
Yes.
I didn't see the 2 no votes.
Yes, it was by Trustee Solis and Trustee Atkins.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is L3, Adopt Resolution 1920-52, authorizing the borrowing of the funds for fiscal 2020-2021 and the sale of tax and revenue anticipation notes and participation in the California School Cash Reserve Program and the sale of notes. Mr. McLean.
Thank you, President Carrillo. And yes, that is a very long title for an item. So we are asking the board tonight to adopt the resolution that we discussed at the last meeting. As we've just been discussing, there is a lot of unknowns. We hope to know, like Mrs. Cox said, we'll know more on Thursday, but we probably won't know all. But there's enough information there to believe that the state is going to possibly do deferrals as they've done in the past with cash going to districts. And so because of that, we are recommending this. There is a history of using these trans in Central Unified School District. We look back, and the last issue was done in June of 2015 for 3.3 million, but going back the last 20 years, I'm sure some of the board members will recall that trans has been a useful tool in the past just to ensure that we have adequate cash flow throughout the year. So I would open it up to any questions and ask the board for their approval of the motion to approve the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Trustee Atkins?
I noticed that you're saying that the total net cost to the district was be about $10,000. My question is how do we earn $109,000 worth of interest on a note that we're paying $118,000 for?
Yeah, and this was just one scenario that was shared with the board as an example. The money, the trans basically comes out at the first of the year, and the money is held by the district for the year. So there's actually a full year of interest being earned. I think the county rate right now is just over 2%. interest earnings on funds. The period that the trans would be borrowed upon would be a shorter period. And in this case, this estimate was assuming some things that in the past that a lot of times we would just need that trans to bridge through the fall into December when the property tax revenues come in. As you know, our revenues vary very much from month to month. And so again, this was just one example. It's not indicative of what may or may not happen. It's just one idea of what it might look like. It certainly could be a longer period. It could be a shorter period. It could be not used at all. And I did want to also mention that just from the board's discussion last month that I did put in we're not able to amend the resolution because this is a resolution that is shared amongst a pool of different districts, but it's able to put in the notes to the agenda item that we would certainly notify the board with information prior to issuing any trans and give you all full disclosure of information on the potential costs and the interest earned and all the details that you might want to ask about.
So say we have to fall upon using these trans, say 6 months into that scenario, then that bottom dollar scenario would change as well. True?
Yes, it would. So depending on the situation, we would come back to you with more information. But yeah, typically you're going to have some net cost. Could be around 10,000. Could be possibly more, just depending on the situation. Because if you are borrowing funds, there's going to be a cost associated with that, and there are closing costs because this is a debt issuance.
Now, is there any type of interest we have to pay upon the note?
Excuse me?
Is there any type of interest we would have to pay upon this other than closing costs and processing fees and underwriting fees and stuff like that?
Yes, there is a yield on the bonds, and I believe it's a little over 1%. So bonds have very low yields historically at these times compared to maybe times in years past. So there is a low interest burden on the trans than there might have been in years gone by.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then you're saying that interest earned would be greater than interest paid.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
If I can add one thing, Trustee President Carrillo.
Go ahead.
So, 10 years ago when we went through a similar type of situation, we were facing some really serious cash flow issues. And if it wasn't for the trans back then, we were in jeopardy of making payroll. And we were fortunate enough to actually participate in the cash reserve program. Had we not, payroll would have been in jeopardy. So, this is a couple months ago, 3 months ago, when we were talking about this, you say, oh yeah, it might be a good idea. Well, here we are 3 months later, it looks like this may even come to fruition. So we don't want to be out there, down the road, almost a year from now, and the state deferring payments and the cash flow being an issue. And then all of a sudden we're trying to scramble to figure out how we're going to make payroll. So, this is a very important item tonight, and staff's recommendation that we move forward with the trans authorization.
Thank you, Superintendent Alvarado. Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Trustee Paul?
Yeah, so it sounds like a reasonable program, but just never been through this process. So just probably for some of our information, some have probably experienced it, but a couple of things. Our collateral essentially for the loan is essentially tax base and ADL and those types of things, correct?
Yes.
And then, like you said, it's a pool, but I'm just two things. Wondering what kind of contingencies, what kinds of. I saw some language in there about default, including not paying the total amount due. Have school districts ever experienced that in your experience? And number two, are there other options? I'm assuming there aren't, but I thought I'd ask the question. Thank you.
Sure. So as far as my experience goes, I'm not aware of defaults. I'm sure that is a possibility, but I'm not aware. And I know that this is a CSBA sponsored program. I think that we put in the notes, but it involves attorneys. It involves Dale Scott, which is, you guys have talked with Mark Farrell in the past, and they do a very careful review of finances and district, and there's a credit rating that goes along with it. So there are a lot of parameters to go through, and that's part of the reason of putting this out here in May rather than at the last minute, because it does take weeks, if not months, to put this package together. It's as you know, financial issues such as this, like bonds, can be very complex, and there's a market to deal with, and so it takes time. And so, to answer your question, I think there is a scrutiny of any districts that are participating in this program, whether they would qualify and be part of the program or not. The second question, as far as other options, I haven't seen any alternatives right now. I know this is what CSBA is putting forth as a very solid and time tested option in terms of short-term borrowing. And again, it's just to help with cash flow throughout the year. It's designed to begin and end within a single year.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Any other comments or questions? Hearing nothing further, what are the wishes of the board on this item? I have a motion by, I'm sorry, Trustee Cox, did you have a question? Okay, I have a motion by Trustee Cervantes. Is there a second? I have a second by Trustee Solis. All those in favor, please say aye or communicate your support. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
L4, ratify fund transfers for March 2020. Mr. McLean.
Thank you. And yeah, these are the fund transfers for the month of March that we typically take to the board every month. And there's an attachment there. We're asking the board to ratify the fund transfers for March.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, what are the wishes of the board on this item? I have a motion to approve by Trustee Atkins. Is there a second? I have a second by Trustee Solis. All in favor, please say aye or communicate your support. Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Next item, L5, ratify warrant list for April 2020. Mr. McLean.
Thank you, President Carrillo. So we're recommending the board ratify the warrant list for April 2020. We had 392 warrants issued at a total amount of $2.7 million.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this item? I have a couple of questions. So the items on the warrant list, are these invoices for services that were provided in the month of April, or do some of them bleed through from previous months?
Yeah, they can be with previous months as well as the current month.
Okay, because my concern is for the month of April, we still had, we paid for the sheriff's services and the Fresno police, and I'm wondering how that's been impacted due to the COVID-19 and whether we're going to see some changes or reduction in that cost as a result of our facility closures.
Yeah, going forward, I believe that's an item we can discuss. I believe we're under contract right now, and I don't know if Mr. Quijin has anything to add on that, but yeah, we're currently just paying according to the contract.
Have we reviewed those contracts to see whether we have any terms that would allow us to suspend? I mean, it doesn't seem appropriate that we be paying for a service when it's not our fault that there's a COVID situation. I mean, I understand there's a contract, but that was also one of the questions from previous board meetings for us to be reviewing some of these contracts to determine what our next step would be on some of them.
Yeah, President Correa, I can't speak to services outside of people services, but I could tell you that, for example, we had a contract with after-school tutors, teaching fellows. You've seen them come to the board with contracts in previous years, as a matter of fact, early as last semester. So in discussions with that company, we've suspended any payment for non-services for that particular company. We also have a contract with law enforcement. We have SROs and a sheriff deputy that are currently working for us. They are reporting to work, patrolling the areas, especially the areas where food distribution is taking place and Chromebook distribution. And also, as Ms. Davis mentioned earlier, some of those students that are in need, our law enforcement officers are assisting us in those areas too for student welfare checks and similar services like that. Other than that, I can't speak to, paper products or other type of services, but those things are as explained.
Thank you, Mr. Collegian. Yeah, I had the same question about SynCal mentoring, and I was wondering how they're providing services during the COVID-19.
That contract we have suspended. Their services stopped March 13th. All of our contracts for their other mental health services are continuing, and they provide logs for the services that they provide, obviously confidential, but we're good.
Okay. And the last item, well, the last two items were, we have about a little under $5,000 for drug testing center. I'm assuming that and hoping those were for services in March or not services that would have been
Right,
performed.
yeah. We also reached out to that company as well. We've suspended their services. The last invoice we served them was for services rendered physically working with our students. Outside of that, that contract has not moved forward.
And just to address the contract, staff has reviewed the contracts and have reduced where appropriate.
And the last item was the CATA conference in Reno. I think that was scheduled to occur in April, unless I'm mistaken.
Is that the transportation conference?
It's activities director, CATA.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
There were no conferences past our school closure.
Thank you. What are the wishes of the board on this item? I have a motion by trustee Atkins. Is there a second? I have a second by trustee Paul. All those in favor, please say aye or communicate your support.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. And that is our last action item. We now move forward on our information items. M1, receive information on budget impacts resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. McLean.
Thank you, President Carrillo. And if you'll give me just a second, I will get my screen up on the screen for everyone to see.
And as Mr. McLean shares his screen, if I can just ask, as we transition between the PowerPoint and to soliciting any comments and questions from the board, if you can use the chat feature to let me know that you have questions, because I can't see everyone on the same window. So if you raise your hand, I apologize. I'm not intentionally ignoring you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we are moving rapidly into the month of May, and the May revise, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, is coming up on Thursday. But there was some news coming out as early as last week, and the Department of Finance was starting to talk about the deficit. And so I'm just going to jump to that page on slide 2. The state employment rate, just for comparison, this is all Department of Finance information from the state that prior to the pandemic, the unemployment rate was at 3.9% and is expected to grow. It's been growing, as we know, the last few weeks and months since it started. And I was reading about Los Angeles. I think they're talking about, I think I read something about 24% unemployment in the city of Los Angeles being predicted. So these are rates that are somewhat unprecedented and clearly an area for concern. So we did get some revenue estimates for the May revision ahead of Thursday. And this is on the total state budget, not just education, but a revision downward of $41 billion, an increase due to the Health and Human Service caseload increases of $7 billion, and then other expenditures that the state is incurring due to COVID of $6 billion. So they were putting the overall deficit figure at $54 billion. And again, depending on the duration of business restrictions, and I know we're beginning to work our way through the reopening of businesses around the state and in different counties, but it takes time to reopen. And so these are the predictions, and these are the numbers that cover both the 1920 school year and fiscal year, as well as the 2021 year. So it's really a look at both years, mostly the final quarter here of the current school year, and then the full 12 months for next year. So the bulk of that is falling on next year, of course. One thing that we have at this time with the state that we didn't have 10 years ago is that rainy day fund that was begun several years ago, which is projected for next year to be about $18 billion. That's actually down a little bit from where it was. And the education side of the budget, which is, we refer to Prop 98, the deficit on the K-12 education, not colleges, but just K-12, is estimated to be about $16 billion out of that $54 billion. Any questions on that slide? If not, I'll move forward. So as we said, the May revise is coming out Thursday. I wouldn't be surprised to see some information kind of seeping out tomorrow. I'm not sure what time that's scheduled for Thursday, but it'll be all over the news. And this May revise every year is a time when districts are able to update their revenue and assumptions from what we had back in January. At this point, everything that we heard back in January, usually there's some tweaks between January and May. In this case, it's just pretty much throw January away and start over with May, because everything that we heard in January really does not fit, does not apply anymore. So as you may know, tax return due dates that normally would be April 15th are delayed until and extended until July 15th. So like Mrs. Cox said earlier, we will have a better picture of what the state is going to say here this week, but we will not really get a fuller picture until probably the end of July or early August. And I wouldn't be surprised to have a special legislative session. We'll see if they call one. I know Governor Brown used to do that in the past. So I would expect that they would reconvene and talk further about what to do once they get those numbers in. There was a cost of living adjustment for next year that was estimated on our second interim report that Mrs. Balladares prepared for the March board meeting. That was at 2.29%. The statutory COLA came out last week, and that came out as 2.31%. But the question is, will that COLA be funded or not? I know we would all like to see that COLA funded from an education standpoint, but School Services of California and other AXA, CSBA is telling us not to expect that to be funded because of the loss of revenue. And so we're waiting for Thursday to see what they say. So based on that COLA of 2.3%, that is a zero COLA funded versus a funded unfunded COLA. It's a $3.7 million difference for Central Unified. And again, we think that's probably at this point could be the best scenario we get, but we won't know more until next week. So I did want to talk about some of the one-time relief funds that we are seeing, and that is on the state side, there was legislation that was passed quickly in early April, I believe it was, for COVID response funds, and the Central Unified share of that was $262,000 approximately. It's part of that bill included the fact that our normal attendance-based funding that usually runs through April 15th, this year was very unique. They closed it off as of February 29th prior to COVID, the COVID epidemic. And so there really wasn't a attendance penalty because of the fact that we were closed in March and April like there would have been otherwise. So that was helpful that the state took that action. On the federal side, we talked about this a little bit previously, but the CARES Act, the federal act, part of that was going out to schools, and the district's fund of that is estimated to be about $4.5 million. That will come through CDE. I've been looking at their webpage just to see if there's been any updates, and haven't seen that yet, but we do expect that money to be coming through before the end of the school year, and hopefully sooner. In addition, FEMA has provided an application process. I was on a couple of webinars for that today as to how to do that. We have a application in, but we have not submitted our what's called our project application. We're getting training information on that and some guidance on that. And you actually have, I think, 6 months to file that. We're not going to wait 6 months, but we hope to be filing that in the near future once we have a better picture of what the parameters are for applying. Again, that will reimburse COVID-19 expenditures. There has not been any indication of what the dollar limit is on that application. So we're trying to learn a little bit more about that. We want to make sure that we get every funding that we possibly can to help offset the budget challenges that we're going to have, and for all the additional supplies and all the food service and all the things that we are experiencing now and in the months to come. We want to be able to be reimbursed for those things. This is a matching program, so there is a 75% reimbursement through the FEMA program. The board approved the resolution last month for us to apply for this and to move forward. So we will continue to update you as we go forward on that. And then there is a lot of discussion about additional funding coming from the federal side through a second round of the CARES Act. And there is a resolution before the board tonight that talks about that. It was a CSBA recommended template to show our legislators and our government leaders that we would advocate to receive more federal funding to help us through this crisis. Any questions on that page?
Mr. McLean, we can probably hold for questions until the end of the presentation, if that's okay with you.
Sure, yeah. If anyone raises their hand, just let me know. I'll just keep moving through.
Thank you.
Some additional mitigation measures that we might hear about on Thursday. The one question is that rainy day fund, that is the full government budget, state budget. So how much of that might be earmarked towards schools? That'll be a question that we'll want to be watching. The federal government has already shown us the ability to get some waivers, and I believe the state board just approved those waivers last week. So there is flexibility in our title funds as to carryover and to the use of those funds. So they're giving us flexibility in that area. Another question will be, will there be any flexibility in the use of supplemental and concentration dollars? Those are monies that are earmarked for unduplicated students, but those monies they are supplemental in nature, and they were not there, when we started the LCAP process, prior to the LCAP process. So it'll be interesting to see if the state has a discussion on that. In previous tough budget years, the routine restricted maintenance fund, which is normally a required 3% contribution into that to make sure that districts keep up with their maintenance so that facilities don't go by the wayside. In tough times, sometimes we'll see that suspended in the past. So we'll look for that again. That'll provide some flexibility within our budget to move those dollars around where they might be needed. Another issue that's been discussed is whether absences that are related, student absences related to COVID-19, whether those might be deemed as excused absences and therefore not penalizing the district for funding because of the fact that students are out for those reasons. STRS and PERS, I know we've talked about in the past, those rates are continuing to increase. And so will the state freeze those rates at the current levels? Will they provide some funding to help us cover those rate increases? That's another question. And then state minimum wage increases. As you know, the last couple of years, the state of California has increased the state minimum wage by $1 each December 31st. And it's slated to go from $13 to $14 again this year. So there is a possibility that that could change. On the other hand, it could be left alone. So we'll hope to hear more on that later this week. Moving on to some other items to discuss. Certainly the cafeteria fund, we are being reimbursed for the meals that we are currently serving, but because of the fact that we still are carrying our staff and even costs of some of our products are going up, there is potential loss there. And I think that might be an area where the federal FEMA funds may be able to help us. We're looking at that very closely. Lottery revenues, as you might guess, is probably going to be down for the fourth quarter. So there'll be some reduction in that area. It's not a huge part of our budget, but it is part of the budget. As we were talking last month, with the opening of the new high school, whenever you open a new school, there are startup costs that go along with that. And so that's an issue that we'll be talking about here again shortly. As I mentioned a minute ago, the pension costs continue to go up. As we know, health benefit costs continue to go up, and I will be bringing that back for discussion with the board the next couple of board meetings as to the health benefit rates for next year. Statutory benefits such as workers' comp, there are some provisions related to COVID around workers' comp, and we can talk about that more further. But we expect that some of our costs will continue to go up. And as I mentioned, minimum wage a second ago. The ongoing issue that we have with the lack of funding for the special ed programs that we're required to provide, as well as our on the transportation side, specifically related to special ed students. Our transportation budget from the state is flat funded. We never get a COLA on that. So over time, we continue to lose ground in that area as costs go up each year. And then a little bit of a bright side, just the last couple of months, because of the school closure with buses not running, conferences not taking place, utilities, our schools are more in a kind of a summer, quieter mode. We do have some activity, but not as much as usual. A reduction in the scope of summer school. All those things will help to probably show us in a better reserve position for the end of this current year than we would have been otherwise. So it's really next year that we're most concerned about. On the reserve side, on the second interim report in March, we reported that we projected to end this year at 16%. Following that, with the ongoing costs that are coming up in next year, we expect that to go down, of course, but we will continue to keep the board updated on that. And once we have the May revised information, we will jump right on that. Mrs. Baladeras will be updating all the budget assumptions based on what we know from the governor's announcements. And we will, as a cabinet, we are talking about budget on a daily basis. We will be looking at anything and everything, and we'll be coming back to the board with a lot of discussion and ideas about how we can face the challenges that we are going to be facing as we approach our adopted budget in June. We don't know whether the state will defer payment of district funds even as early as this June or July. It's possible. It could come at the end of next year. We just don't know at this point. So that's going to be a big question for Thursday as well. And again, we talked about the trans earlier. So we do have this ability to utilize the trans if we need it. And we also have the ability to make short-term loans in between our funds, as you see the item on the board agenda every month. So we do have some flexibility there because we do have other funds as well. So the upcoming timeline that we have is to get the revise this week. And then I would anticipate that we will provide the board with another update at the next board meeting in just 2 weeks. Our schedule right now is that June 9th, the summary of the budget will be presented. Again, the process is a little bit different this year than it's been the last couple of years because the state did provide some changes in regards to LCAP. So we would have a public hearing and district budget adoption on the 23rd. And there is the new report that I mentioned previously last board meeting that's called the COVID-19 Operations Written Report. We just got the template on that a few days ago, and staff are already taking a look at that report, and we'll have that ready for the board in June. As we said, tax returns are delayed this year. So in August, we expect to get a bigger update in August as well. We'll know more about the Prop 98 funding levels for next year. And then lastly, at the end of the year, by December 15th, we would be adopting our 1-year LCAP, so not a 3-year LCAP, but sort of a special 1-year template for just this year by December 15th. So final thoughts, Cabinet, we're already talking about positions as they come through, new positions, vacant positions, what to do with those. Again, keeping the budget picture in mind. We're reading articles every day. We'll share information with the board as we have it. And again, we'll give a new update on May 26th. So with that, I'll entertain any questions that the board has.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Do any members of the board have any questions? If you use your feature to raise your hand, or if you send me a message on the chat feature, I'll know that you wish to provide any questions or comments. Trustee Chan.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. McLean. I had one sort of related question and one possible question that may be more directed actually at Trustee Cox, who maybe would provide more information than I can. One was related to, of course, to get an idea of our incurred costs as we've provided more food for our families, whether we're having discussions about that, about what our plans are for the summer. And I've heard in terms of the the federal money that was given to cities of those, and this I'm hoping that Trustee Cox will have more information, but in terms of the federal money that was given to cities with populations over 500,000, that there are discussions at the city level whether school districts, in terms of their food services, in terms of food distributions, may be able to tap into some of that to recoup some of their costs as well. But Trustee Cox may have more information than I, but I've heard that other school districts are having conversations with the city. Yeah, so we're currently, even through March, April, May, we're currently falling under what would normally be the summer meals program. We have a reimbursement for that from the state. And at this point, as far as I'm aware, that we would continue to provide service until something changes. I know we have frequent calls with other districts in the county and the county office as well. And it sounds like everyone is anticipating a continuation of food services. But if there are other funds that we can tap into as well, that would be good to look at. So we will take that into account.
Thank you. Trustee Cox, did you want to share anything?
I just wanted to respond to Mr. Chan's comment, and I think that right now, everything is still, the city of Fresno did receive 92 million in CARES Act funding. And I know that they're doing a very, stellar job. They're going to be looking at some big hits, just like Central Unified, that they're going to have to cover. But at the same time, there is a big gap to cover up our businesses, to keep them keep going. Our feet on the ground is to get people fed. There's a couple of items on this Thursday's agenda that will impact the communities, even Central Community. We have where we're going to add another $2 million to help our local businesses, our small businesses, grants. These will be a full grant. They're not a payback. There'll also be first time for our renters and our homeowners that are getting behind on their payments. There'll be grants that will be issued, and it can, if you can make the, if the landlord is amenable, and he will take the rent at an 80% value and forgive the rest. So that's kind of helps the landlord receive some income now. So that might be something that would be going, or it would go directly to the consumer to pay the rent. So it's housing retention money. And then the third one that's going to go to council this Thursday also is for our small farmers. We have micro farmers. We have approximately 500 micro farmers within the city of Fresno limits. And they're small crops, 2-3 acres at the most. They are dumping the product now because we don't have restaurants open. We don't have farmers markets open. So the food is going to waste. So the city of Fresno is proposing to give those farmers small grants. And in exchange for the grants, they will agree that all their surplus product that isn't purchased will be donated to the local food bank. And that money, that food, the fresh produce, the vegetables, nuts, etc., will be again distributed to those that are unemployed at this time. So it's just filling all those gaps. And I know the summer programs for foods, the city of Fresno is still considering keeping up the lunches during the summer program. So that will take over when the school districts can no longer serve. The city can take that gap. But I know it's everybody, it's all of us together, just kind of communicating and filling in gaps where we can, because we don't want anybody to fail. We want our businesses to stay in, and we want our individual people that are out of work to also feel like they're supported. So, and I think Central's done a great job on that too. I am impressed every day on all of the postings to see the amount of support that our community is getting and given to each other.
Thank you, trustees. Trustee Paul?
Yeah, just a point of clarification on the federal, I think it's CARES, right? 4.5 million, that's for our district, right?
That is the central allocation. Yeah, it's not been verified, but that's the estimate at this time.
That's the estimated. Okay. And if we're successful, if there's a successful effort for a second CARES, any idea at this point what that might look like?
I think it could possibly even be more than that amount. We're waiting to see, but I think the push, with us, I know CTA is involved, and again, the resolution asking for another $200 billion. That's a state, or that's a nationwide push, but I think there are pretty substantial amounts that could be part of the equation there. But we don't have any estimate at this point.
Thank you.
If I could just add, so again, we're not, because of the May revise not being out yet, it's difficult to estimate. There's been a lot of numbers thrown around as to the level of cuts, but just to give the board some scale, so a 1% cut in our revenues would amount to about $1.6 million per 1%. So depending on if there are larger cuts than 1%, you can just do the multiplication and figure out what the level would be for us. So again, I'll have a lot more information on that at the next board meeting, but that's kind of the scope or the scale for you to consider.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? I have a quick question. Do we know, are there limitations and restrictions as to how these funds can be used?
Which funds are you referring to?
So each of the pods that you discussed and had on your slide.
Oh, for the one-time funds. Again, they're primarily COVID related. Some are more available just for operations in general, but you know, our issue right now is the cost of COVID related issues and related to the closure. So distance learning, supplies such as masks and, you know, PPE, things like that, technology. Those are kind of the primary drivers of our costs right now, but it could be beyond that. So we'll, you know, we'll use it however we can.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Thank you very much for that presentation, and the board looks forward to hearing a little bit further about the detailed impacts to our district. Our next item is M2, receive information regarding activities related to COVID. Ms. Davis.
Thank you. First, as Superintendent Alvarado mentioned, I was going to talk a little bit about graduation. A communication was sent out last Friday announcing 2 events for seniors to celebrate this major milestone. The first commitment, as was stated, is to honor the traditional and live graduation event. Knowing that this can't occur until it's safe to do so, Public Health Department would give us that guidance for us. And I think it's important to note that these are not our own rules that we determined. We shared that with our student leaders when they spoke to us. We are in the company of the other Valley schools and universities with this, but it is still our desire to have a live graduation. The dates will be posted online. They are August 13th at 7 p.m. for Central High School, September 9th at 6 p.m. in our PAC for Pershing and Pathway High School, and September 11th at 6 p.m. In the PAC for class. Again, we'll post those and share those for you. In addition, that second event, students are participating in a virtual ceremony beginning this week at Central High School. Students are scheduled to walk across a stage in a cap and gown with immediate family watching from a very safe distance. These moments will be captured on video and compiled into a virtual graduation to be celebrated online on the day that graduation was to occur. So June 11th at 7 p.m., as was noted on YouTube and PBS, will be the Central High School graduation celebration. Pershing and Pathway are scheduled for June 15th at 6 p.m. and class on June 17th at 6 p.m. I'm rattling off a lot of dates, but please rest assured we'll share those with you. For the community that may be listening to this item and for you as well, we do recommend that seniors and the community follow their school's senior activities website. That's where the most current updates are being managed and maintained. I want to also turn to instruction. We're in the second of 3 cycles, 2-week cycles of instruction this spring. Last week, we distributed our second round of packets and collected for the first time packets of completed student work. Hotspots are set to arrive this week. We had anticipated them last week. However, the entire state is looking for the same items right now. But ours are set on Friday to arrive. We have already identified the students. They have identified that they have a need for it. We have prioritized to start with our AP students who may be taking exams currently. We've got them taken care of, and then we're going to go through and make sure our high school students, middle school, and into elementary are taken care of those who have needed a hotspot. We also participated statewide, identifying that we needed additional hotspots, wondering if this would continue and how to make sure through summer programs and things like that, that we would have as much access as possible. We've already been contacted by the State Department. We are waiting to hear when our cycle will come due. It sounds like it is within the next few weeks. Our Director of Ed Tech, Jason Horstman, is keeping a close eye and saying hello to those connections often to make sure we can get the devices, our students, the hotspots that are in need. We are back in development mode for summer school programs. That question had come up earlier. Our middle and high school programs will be delivered online. We're exploring options for what might be able to be offered to our younger learners, taking a look at what possible opportunities might be available. And we plan to announce those offerings within the next week or so. Before I wrap up, I do want to share my screen just briefly and show you a resource that we have available to our families. And so if I can, not that one, if I can get to the resource, my apologies. There we go. Sorry about that. Forgot I had that placeholder up there. This is the Parents COVID online resource. If you haven't visited, I recommend that you do. I want to thank Cindy Escandone, the coaches, Jason Horseman, who have been keeping this active. I won't show you both sites, but I will share with you that this site, if I click over to the other option, is also available completely in Spanish. You'll also notice that the site has links throughout it in Punjabi as well. So some of the things you might find as a parent on this site are any of the packet pickup or return schedules, lunch schedule. Senior news will be updated to include the items that I mentioned this evening, as well as a link to the senior pages. Parent trainings are spotlighted here. We just received a flyer for some parenting classes on how to handle some of the discipline and responsibilities of being the child's teacher and encouraging them as a parent. So we put those there. Grading guidelines can be found here. And then our central on call for students. We're logging 30 to 40 calls this week of parents and students asking for help. As you notice, you can get the schedule in 3 languages, so you know who to call and when to call. Also a guide to be prepared for when you make that tutoring call, what you might want to have ready. Distance learning, passwords, how to get help, as well as some links across the top for accessibility if you need to make your equipment more accessible and where to go to get help or to get some library readers. The teachers also have a page similar to the site I just showed you with resources that would be appropriate for them to be planning their instruction. Surrounded by a lot of amazing people. The site keeps growing each day, and so I encourage you to visit the site or point people that might reach out to you who are in need of some communication or some resources. Please point them there so that we can help them or have them call one of our numbers. That's it for me.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Are there any questions or comments for Ms. Davis? Trustee Paul?
Looks like you guys have been working really hard. That looks really good. Appreciate all the hard work. Quick question on the languages. It's awesome to see Spanish and Punjabi. Have you given thought to Hmong?
We do have a Hmong translator available by phone. What we've found in translating documents is the families have indicated for the most part that they're not reading Hmong, that they just need somebody available by phone. And so we do have that.
Thank you.
If I can also comment, our translators right now are working incredibly hard because everything we put out, every announcement, and we've had some volume because everything has been online, has been in all 3 languages.
Thank you. Trustee Cox?
And just a quick question, Katie, that's a great presentation. Is that available somewhere online so that everybody could see that?
Which presentation, the parents?
Yeah, the one that you just, and the one that kind of like, because by department, this is a great report, but we don't have anything in our packet. So I'm just wondering, is it available somewhere that people can go look at the presentation?
So Ms. Davis, can you walk us through how we could find that link? Because I was wondering the same thing, Trustee Cox. Thank you.
So I'm going to go live and share my screen with you again. And if you go to the centralunified.org website, when you land on that page, Sonia has a pop-up that asks you if you want the latest updates. I have already loaded this page, so it's not showing up. And so if that happened to you, if you went right front and center, you would see Central Online Learning Resources. If you click there, it will take you to all of the possible resources. So it might not be, well, I think our site is phenomenal. It may not be that you need. You may need to know about some of the news updates, how to get Wi-Fi, but right here in the center, you'll see parent student resource. So 2 clicks, once you're on centralunified.org, click to go to the COVID resources, and then click to the parent resource and you're here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davis. Trustee Cox, did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you so much. It's great, great resources. I just wanted to make sure that our public is able to get them. And thank you so much for putting that up there.
Thank you. I want them to see it too, so appreciate that.
Any further comments or questions? Thank you, Ms. Davis. Executive Services.
Thank you. I'll be very brief because we already covered the budget aspect of COVID, but just again, kudos to our nutrition team and the admin supporting them. We have, by the end of this week, I think we'll be at 350,000 grab and go meals that have been served since we started this about 2 months ago. So they're doing a great job, and we continue to provide essential support through technology and through our maintenance and operations teams, our custodians, and everyone is just doing a great job to support the effort to support our students and families during this time.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. McLean? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next report, Human Resources. Mr. Collegian.
Thank you, President Carrillo. Health screenings continue to take place for essential staff upon arrival and departure to school sites or other district offices. With appropriate PPE, protective personnel equipment, such as gloves and masks provided for our employees as well. HR staff is working this week for the third iteration of frequently asked questions, which should go out Thursday afternoon for HR and COVID-related matters. We're also updating the essential services form for all of our employees who are traveling to and from work to have a signed document by Superintendent Alvarado saying that, essentially stating that they're essential employees, and we'll extend that to June 30th. HR is working now to recognize and celebrate our retirees at the first board meeting in June with a digital presentation. So that's exciting for them, and we're looking forward to honoring them on that day. It'll look very differently knowing that we're doing this remotely now, but nonetheless honoring their fantastic service they've provided to Central Unified. Looking forward to that. New student registration and student transfers continue to be processed online. We're getting more and more transfers and registration information through Aries. So again, thanks Student Information Systems and Ms. Maisie Young for assisting in that process. And interviews are continue to be conducted remotely and if necessary in person while exercising social distancing. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Collegian. Are there any questions or comments, Mr. Collegian?
Thank you.
Hearing nothing further, we'll move on to the next item. M3, receive information regarding a public hearing and adoption of resolution number 1920-57, statutory school fees, level 1 developer fees. Mr. McLean.
Thank you. So tonight, just for information purposes, we are sharing with the board the information regarding both level 1 and level 2 fees. And as you know, level 1 fees are sort of the statutory fees that the state allocation board sets every 2 years. So those come up in even number of years. So in January, a few months ago, the state allocation board increased the rate and developer fees for level 1 from the current rate of $3.79 per square foot to $4.08 per square foot. And there's also a commercial rate that applies. It was increased from 61 cents to 66 cents per square foot. So that increase is based on a statewide cost index, and that's a 2-year increase of 7.64%. So it's kind of like a cost of living increase every 2 years on that. But so along with that, districts typically in even number of years will update their school facility fee justification report. So that is attached to this item. And then we have 2 items here tonight. So I don't know if you want me to proceed with just one at a time. And I do believe we also have a caller that we're going to bring in as well.
Yeah, let's do each item at a time. I think I've been notified that we have some public comments, but it's on item M4. So we'll wait. Okay. Are there any comments or questions from the board at this time on this item? Trustee Cox.
Sorry, I'm a little slow in the mute. So, Steve, can you remind me, when was the last time we had this raise? What was the level and the amount for the last one?
For the level 1 fees?
Mhm.
Yes, let me grab my notes here. And again, just to be clear, so the district has had level 2 fees, which we're going to talk about in a minute, for a number of years. And so level 1 fees typically are applied just to the commercial rate, the 61 cent rate. Let's see if I can find that. But typically it's raised every 2 years, Terry. So it goes up a little bit at a time. But again, the rate that is coming forward now is a little bit higher than it was before. So let me find that sheet. I'm sorry. $4. It's now $4.08, but it was $3.79 prior to that on the level 1. But again, that rate does not typically apply because we do have level 2 in effect. So level 2 basically overrides level 1. It's the commercial rate that level 1 is there. However, if you have level 2 and for any reason level 2 is discontinued, then level 1 picks back up and you would revert back to that rate. If that makes sense.
So what is the ratio of commercial to residential income that we have?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
So what is the ratio of commercial income to residential income? Is it like 10%? Is it 50? You know, I mean, just what is going to give it ballpark?
Oh, in terms of the fees that are collected? Okay.
Or the property, it's one or the other, whatever it is. Yeah, the fees are more relative, I guess.
Yeah, I would have to get that information back for you just because it's my first year here. So I don't have that at my fingertips, but I can get an answer for you on that.
This is just information tonight, so maybe you could roll that into the next report.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
So again, the last time we would have increased the level 1 fees would have been in early 2018. And typically you do that towards the spring of each even numbered year. As the state raises the rate, districts tend to do their studies, soon after that. And that's what we've been trying to do. I think we talked about with the board last year, getting on a schedule where our fees are coming through in the spring rather than in the fall or winter, so that we're more in line with when the state is making the adjustments.
Thank you. Trustee Paul?
Given the current situation, obviously the economic situation, the data that went into this, was that, have any idea when that was derived? Was it derived at the end of the time before we were all restricted, before the economies took a hit? Do you have any sense for that? Have you discussed that with the company that prepared the document?
For level 1 or level 2? Are you talking about either one or just level 1 right now?
Either one.
Yeah. Yeah, the studies were worked on previously, so I don't know that level 1 again is statutory, so it's really just a matter of showing the justification. It's not going to change based on the economic ups or downs necessarily. Level 2 is again unique to each district, and so that again is looking at the way that the rules work. It typically looks at your past and what is currently projected for future development, but it doesn't necessarily take in all the more immediate factors that may come into play as far as what's going on with COVID and things like that.
Yeah, I meant the economy is going to be hit. It's being hit, and that will directly affect that part of the market. So that was the point of my question.
Yeah, and I believe that's typically the case in this type of environment. We're going to see our revenues that we normally get from developer fees are likely to diminish. Just the number of permits and the activity is expected to go down.
Administration is requesting this item return June 23rd, 2020. Mr. McLean, can you ensure that we get a response to Trustee Paul's question as far as the time period that the data was collected and is being used for the report?
Sure. And again, the reason that we do not bring this back until June is because there are requirements of public noticing. We will be advertising on both level 1 and level 2 fees, and we're to let that period of time pass rather than bring this back to the very next meeting. So just so the board is clear on that, there is a time gap there that we are taking into account.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on this item? Hearing nothing further, this item will return as an action item for June 23rd, 2020. We'll move on to M4, receive information regarding a public hearing and adoption of resolution number 1920-58, alternative school facilities fee, level 2, level 3 developer fees. And Mr. McLean will present on that. After Mr. McLean's presentation, I do know that we have some public comments, and so we will invite those public comments at that time, and then we'll have any questions or comments from the board. Go ahead, Mr. McLean.
Thank you. So this resolution, it's actually level 2 and level 3. We tend to talk about level 2 because level 3 does not frequently come into play. Level 3 is a situation where the state no longer has funds available to districts to help pay for the costs of creating facilities for districts that need them. So as you know, the state bond Proposition 13 in March did not pass. So the state is still paying off the existing approvals to districts. In fact, we got a big chunk of money for the new high school a couple months ago. That goes into our Fund 35. That's our state facility fund. But until the state passes another statewide bond, those funds are going to be depleted, and the state will eventually not be able to provide its obligation to help schools with being built. So there is a possibility that at some point level 3 could come into play. But typically we're looking at level 2, and so level 2 there are certain criteria that have to be met, and the district has had level 2 fees for quite a few years, and so we did have a resolution that went to the board back in December for the level 2 fees at that time, based on the calculation, was $5.16 per square foot for residential construction. So commercial, again, level 1, residential level 2 takes over. And so we updated that study here because the state had updated its numbers in terms of the grant amounts that are used in the calculation. But the other factors in the report are pretty much the same as what the board received back in December. And so the increase as a result was very modest. It was a less than 1% increase, a 4-cent increase on the calculation from $5.16 to $5.20 per square foot. And so again, this would be coming forward at the June 23rd board meeting as well. Again, developer fees, while we do expect permits to activity probably to slow a bit, it is part of how we as a district are able to build our new schools, such as our new high school that's being built right now. And the fact that our own local bond, Measure C, did not get approval on March 3rd makes it even more critical that we are able to access developer fee funds as well as other avenues to be able to create additional classrooms for our students. So I'll open it up to comments and questions.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. At this time, we'll take the public comments that we have on the line. Just a friendly reminder, each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. And if we can have the speakers please introduce themselves to the board. Thank you.
I have Mr. Darius Assemi, and Mr. Assemi, I'm going to put you on now, and you have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you, Chair Carrillo, members of the board, Darius Assemi, Granville Homes, also representing Lennar Homes and Watson Castanos Homes. First of all, Ramadan Mubarak to all of the Muslim friends at Central Unified. I want to thank Superintendent Alvarado for working with us over the last year on trying to come to some kind of a resolution, although I don't believe we're there this evening. We believe that, in the interest of time, I'm just going to be very brief. We believe that your consultants are not following government code as it's outlined. And I'm going to read that to you briefly. Government Code, Chapter 4.9, Section 65995.6. It basically says, this projection of unhoused pupils shall be based on historical student generation rates of new residential units constructed during the previous 5 years that are of a similar type of unit to those anticipated to be constructed, either in the school district or the city or county in which the school district is located. It goes on to add a few more languages. So I just want to be very clear. That's what the government code states. And the consultants have not used, because you don't have anything over the previous 5 years for multifamily construction, they are not using data which we have from other projects in the city or the county. So, by the way, the project that is in front of, that is coming up potentially in the district, is one of the projects we're going to be building, which is exact project that we just finished in 2019 in Northeast Fresno and the Clovis Unified. So we believe that, again, this project was built in 2019. You have an identical project. Your statute clearly outlined that you could use the project we built, and your consultants are not following government code 4.9. This creates liability for the district, and we believe it puts on undue burden for middle-class families and home buyers that are trying to buy a home in the district. Then the math is simply wrong. And I also want to add that most districts are lowering fees currently as we speak. I don't know how much more time I've got available, but I'd be glad to answer any questions. Again, clearly, the statute is very clear, very black and white. You go back 5 years, there's not anything 5 years or nearer in the district, you can use another project in the city or the county, which is, the school district is located. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Darius.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russo.
Do we have another?
President Carrillo, we do have another speaker here. I'm going to put him on speaker. We have Mr. Drew Phelps with Granville.
Thank you.
Mr. Phelps, Mr. Phelps.
And staff, but really appreciate the time, President Carrillo, as well as the rest of the board. Thank you so much, staff. Just to echo Darius's thanks, we really appreciate all the work that the board and the staff especially has done to really cooperate on this issue and try to come to some sort of term. We've worked out a lot of issues that we've had with the school facilities need analysis over the last year and a half or so, and so we really only have one more outstanding concern. It's the same concern we had last December with the facilities need analysis that was passed. We spoke in favor of that with the understanding that we would continue these discussions, which we have, and we hope to continue that to an outcome that aligns with statute, as Darius pointed out. So really, beyond that, there's not a whole lot to say, just the fact that we believe that statute is not being followed very clearly right here, and would like to see it done in a much better way, whether that's with some sort of compromise that may, because there already is some uncertainty about where the statute lies, if that's in some sort of compromise, or whether it's just looking at the entire city, the entire county, the student generation rates as statute points to very clearly. So whatever the consultants decide may be amenable with the statute and what we can decide on in terms of legal folks looking at it, we would be favorable to that. So
just wanted to thank again for the time and thank staff for the continued effort moving forward.
Thank you.
.3 minutes. All right, President Carrillo, I have Eric Gibbons with Wathan Castanos. Mr. Gibbons, you can speak now.
Okay. I'll be really brief. This is Eric Gibbons with Wathan Castanos, and I just wanted to agree with what Darius had mentioned. Obviously, we're building the Westera master plan community out there, and any kind of fee increase right now would be very tough to deal with. Darius and his team have done a great job of going through all of these the statistics and things like that. And I think the districts should just take a harder look at what the consultants have put together and revise it and figure out what's the right way to go about this. So again, I just wanted to thank you for your time tonight and hope you'll reconsider implementing this at this time, especially with what's going on with COVID. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons.
Okay, we have Mr. Michael Prandini here. And you may speak, Mr. Prandini.
Yeah, thank you. Board members, I'm Mike Prandini, representing the Building Industry Association. And we are in agreement. Board members, I'm Mike Prandini, representing the Building Industry Association. And we are in agreement.
Mr. Prandini, can you turn down the volume on your TV or on your computer, please? Hello?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Didn't quite understand the instructions there, so hopefully you can hear me now with no feedback.
Yes.
All right. Again, Mike Prandini, representing the Building Industry Association. We concur with the previous speakers, and we think the analysis done by the Granville Group is, I think, more representative of the true numbers that instead of what was used in the report for the student generation rates. And we think that the board should defer any action on this until the issue has been resolved. So that's all I have to say, and hopefully that this can be resolved amicably and possibly a 30-day delay before and allow the district 30 days to consult with and meet and discuss with the industry to resolve this particular issue. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prandini. Do we have any further comments?
At this point, we have no other calls, President Carrillo.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, this item will return to our June 23rd board meeting as an action item. Our next item, M5, receive information regarding revised board policies. Ms. Davis?
Thank you. Attached to this item is Board Policy 6157, Distance Learning. It is a new policy for us, so the language is from CSBA. We believe it's critical in capturing how distance learning can be utilized in our school district. We obviously have been in need of distance learning right now, and we fully intend to pursue program options going into the future that would allow us distance learning as an option for families. As we're making those plans, we believe this board policy is vital to have within our program. And so this is for info tonight. We do recommend it return to the next meeting for action, and can be prepared to answer questions now about it as well as next meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this item? Hearing none, are we okay if this item returns? I'm sorry, if this item returns under the consent agenda, or do we want an action item? Consent agenda? Okay, this item will return to our next board meeting under consent. Thank you. Item M6, receive information regarding declaration of need for fully qualified teachers for 2020-2021. Mr. Collegian?
Thank you, President Carrillo. The California Commission on Teacher Credentialing requires that the district provide an annual declaration of need for fully qualified educators prior to placing teachers on internships or limited assignment permits. The declaration also includes permits in specialized fields that may be used to expand their current credential holding authorizations to be included in that specialized field. Administration is recommending this item be placed on the board agenda on May 26th for action. Happy to answer any questions the board may have on this item.
Are there any questions from the board? Seeing and hearing none, is this item okay to return under consent? Okay, this item will return to our next board meeting under our consent agenda. M7, receive information regarding legal services for 2020-2021. Mr. McLean?
Thank you, President Carrillo. So it's that time of year when we are renewing our attorney fee contracts for the next year. And we have several firms that are listed for the board's information. And the rates are there as well. So I would open it up to any questions that the board may have in regards to the legal fees. Again, these are just hourly rates. So the actual year-to-date expenditures are shown with this item for this year, but any cost is just dependent on the usage.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, is there any objection if this item returns under our consent agenda? Okay. Perfect. This item will return under our consent agenda. Our next board, I'm sorry, Trustee Atkins, did you have a comment or a question?
I'd like to have this come back as an action item, please.
No problem.
I need to dig into it a little bit further than I've dug into it already.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
This item will return as an action item to our next agenda. M8, receive information regarding resolution 1920-55, issuance of a new warrant.
Yes, so from time to time, we do have warrants that are asked to be replaced. They were lost. And this is an example of a warrant that after 2 years came back up for a request to be reissued. This is a payroll check for about $35. And so just by government code, we're required to bring a resolution before the board to request the county auditor's office to reissue the check. So we're asking that this item be placed on the next board meeting for action.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Mr. McLean, does this item need to return as action, or can it return under consent?
It could come back as consent.
Okay, is there any objection to return this item under consent? Okay, I see no objection. This item will return under consent. M9, receive information on resolution number 1920-59 regarding support of federal education funding in light of impacts associated with COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. McLean?
Yeah, so this is the resolution that we were talking about earlier during my budget presentation with regards to showing a resolution of support for additional federal funding for education in light of what we're going through with the COVID pandemic. So this was based on a template that we received again from CSBA, and we are recommending this be placed on the next board agenda for action on May 26th.
Are there any questions or comments from the board on this item? Seeing and hearing none, is there any objection to bringing this back under consent? Seeing no objection, if we can have this item returned to our next board agenda under consent. Thank you, Mr. McLean. M10, receive information regarding new high school, change order number 4. Mr. McLean.
Thank you. So this is, as you said, change order number 4 in the amount of $37,411. This is a large project, as you know, $104 million project. So this represents just 0.04% of the total project amount. And with the 4 change orders to date, we're at 0.16 of 1%. So again, I'm not sure exactly what our percentage of completion is at this point, but if you've gone by there, you know, we're getting pretty far into the project at this point, and we're doing pretty well with the in terms of the contingency fund. So I would be happy to answer any questions. I can put Joseph on if we need to ask him any questions as well.
Thank you. Trustee Cox?
Hi, thank you. Just 2 quick questions. One, I was wondering about the item 4 on district added scope, enlarging doors for equipment access to building C. What is in building C and what is anticipated to be larger than what the architect rendering had called for?
Okay, any other questions or just that one?
Just in general, in item number 12, just can you explain that a little bit about how that happened and who approved it originally, and then to get, it was approved evidently originally for us to get a credit back, and how, you know, just basically tell us about it. What happened?
Okay, and I'd like Joseph to respond on those as well, because he's very much in tune with that. So let me get him on real quick. Just give me just a second.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve.
Hi, Joseph. Yeah, we have a couple questions from board member Cox. Do you have your information in front of you?
Sure, yes.
Okay, so the first question was related to item number 4, which was enlarging the doors for the equipment access at building C. That was the first item. And then the second item was the item number 12, which was the credit back to the contractor. And just wanted to get some of the backstory on those 2 questions.
Sure. Okay, so item number 4, which is large doors for equipment access. That building is the locker room, and it has the weight room in there. We need to enlarge those doors in order to get weight equipment in and out. We want to ensure that the type of equipment that our athletic department is choosing, that they'll have enough room to get equipment in and out of there. And then item number 12, to the credit back from contractors overcharging. As we review, some of these cores, PCOs come in, we review everything and look at the charges. And we've noticed that there's been some overcharging on the types of markup that the GC is able to charge. And we've been pointing that out, we had discussions about it, and those are the credits back for some of the cores prior that they've been overcharging some of the markups.
Okay, just so follow up, you mentioned that we're getting a credit back for some of the overcharging. Are we getting, is it negotiated? So maybe we're not getting everything back, or maybe I misunderstood.
No, we're getting, as we go along, we're identifying all the ones that they have overcharged at 10% instead of 5%. So we're documenting those and keep a running total. No, but every one that they have overcharged, we're making sure that we get our credit back at a 5% rate.
So Joseph, are you saying there may be more coming down the pike here?
Yeah, there probably probably be a few more that we're going through.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there, Trustee Paul?
Yeah, the first, well, in the explanation, it'd be the top items 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Are we going to be able to recoup some of that?
On the itemized rate, yes. So some of those items, we do keep a running list on everything that's going back to our consultants. And as the project proceeds, and at the end of the project, we have a meeting with them and show them some of the items that have come up because of some design errors. And then we look at how we can recoup some of these costs.
So I know that so far we've had a few of these. Have we been able to, at this point, recoup any of those costs that were resulting of issues with the architect or engineer drawings or design?
Nothing yet. My intent was to hold a meeting with the design team face to face. Unfortunately, this whole shutdown occurred. I'm gonna have to wait. This is something I'd rather do in person rather than do online. It'll probably be a pretty lengthy meeting, but they're definitely in the know that we keeping track of it and have the intent to go back with them, have discussions about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board? I do have 2 questions. If we can just get a little more information regarding item 3 and item 9, particularly, I'd like to know who we were waiting for on offsite approval, and just to ensure that if it wasn't anything on our end, the district's end. And I know that you briefly mentioned that those were some of the items that you would be addressing in person, but I would just like some more information regarding what we were waiting for.
Sure. I can see item 3, temporary relocate. I can provide you some insight now, and if we want a written response, I can provide that as well. Item 3, the temporarily relocate steel bridge and add safety cables to building H. We had some offsite approvals that were going through the city of Fresno. One of our consultants did not follow through and get the city of Fresno approval. And as a result, there are some areas where one of the subcontractors could not go into and make tie-ins, and which delayed that portion of the work. So that's where that cost came from. And what's the other one?
Number 9.
Item 9.
Whole joint.
Correct, item 9.
Oh, okay. Yes, same thing. So we had to block out some of the concrete work, and they couldn't proceed with it. We had to have a hard stop in order for them to pick it up at a later date. And it's a result of another offsite approval. It's the same thing, waiting for the city of Fresno to approve the drawings. Now, something not on the city of Fresno's fault. It was our consultants did not go through the process early enough to get that done in time.
Okay, and those are the 2 items that will be addressed with that consultant as well, correct?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this item? Hearing nothing further, can we have this item returned under consent, or is there any objection to that? Seeing and hearing no objection, if we can have this item returned to our consent agenda for our next board meeting of May 26, 2020. Thank you. Our next item, M11, receive information regarding piggyback bids.
Thank you, President Carrillo. So we have several items here that are coming back for renewal as piggybacks. And again, these are just used as needed. So again, it just depends on the situation, whether we actually will be purchasing items or not. But it gives us the ability to get competitive pricing when we do piggyback on these bids that are done with different districts, different agencies around the state. So be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we would ask that this item be placed on the next board meeting for action.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item? Trustee Cox.
And just a quick one. So on the Kubota and the Deere, both those both those agreements were effective beginning 2017. So they're both in their last year of renewable agreement. In the agreements, they allowed us to renew it on a 1-year extendable. Both of those, they'll be expiring this next year. So when you, I would assume you're going to be planning in the next year to go out for a new RFP. And is it particular to the brand, or are we looking for piggybacks that just have that equipment?
Well, when it comes to landscaping, I believe, Kubota and Deere are two of the leading companies that are used for that type of equipment. So if we have to replace a piece of equipment or whatever the need is, we have the ability to use these piggyback bids. So again, the piggyback would enable us to, we would want to come back with either an RFP or to do, get a new piggyback on these items as they expire prior to them expiring, so we can continue to be able to purchase items that we need.
Do you know if on these piggybacks, if the prices are renewed every year, or are these based on the initial agreement year of 2017?
I would have to double check. In some cases, they keep the price at the same. In other contracts, on some occasions you'll see like a price escalator, sort of a cost of living increase on some of them. But I would have to check specifically on these to see.
And that was why I was curious on if we go out, that we're in our last year, if we're going to be seeing some good price increases, because we've been working on 2017 rates, but it's not a deal breaker for me. I just wanted to kind of get that information.
Yeah, and again, I think some of these things are based on supply and demand. So depending on the market and what's going on with the economy at that time, sometimes that works in your favor, sometimes it works against you. But typically when you get these piggyback bids and they're pricing things based on knowing that, agencies up and down the state are going to be piggybacking on these besides just us, you get the kind of the purchasing power, the volume power of purchasing in these situations. So we're always trying to get the best, lowest price we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Hearing nothing further, is there any objection if this returns as consent? Seeing and hearing no objection, can we have this item returned to our next board meeting under consent? Advanced planning, Superintendent Alvarado.
Thank you, President Carrillo. The 12-month calendar is attached. We have another board meeting in a couple weeks, and it'll be via Zoom.
Thank you. Additional information and closing comments by the Board of Trustees. Are there any closing comments from any board member? Trustee Cox.
Mr. Paul, you want to go first?
Sure. Trustee Cervantes, last board meeting, did a call out to all the volunteers that have been serving food, and I just wanted to just bring that up again. There are a lot of people that are really committed to this thing. I hadn't been able to make it out, and I finally made it out to do to take part in that a few times, and it's they're doing a great service. So I just wanted to publicly thank all the individuals that are putting in a lot of effort. There's a lot of stuff being donated. There's a lot of time being sacrificed. Some people had been going out 5 days a week. These are people with families. So just a tremendous effort. And I just wanted to just echo what Trustee Cervantes had brought up last board meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Paul. Trustee Cox.
Hi. Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to follow up from our last meeting. We had a chance to look over some of the nominations from the community regarding the high school naming. And I believe it was, not sure if it was Mr. Atkins or Mr. Paul that brought up that we all received the nomination last July. And I noticed that wasn't on here. And I think that maybe I'd like to recommend that we place it on the list. Just because it probably was on us to notify the person that the nomination period was open. So I just think I would like to have seen that. And I think it would have been nominated anyway. But the name that was nominated that we all received was an Elvin C. Bell.
Can you say that
Trustee
name
Cox?
again, Terry?
It's an unusual name, Elvin, Elvin. Middle initial C and last name Bell, as in ringing the bell. He's a Central High alumni and lives here in Fresno. I think we always see the package and there was a M. Mulligan that nominated him.
Was that, I thought that item, they were requesting to name one of the elementary schools. Was that?
Naming, I think it was the high school, but our name, it gave an option or naming the building, a building. I don't know, I haven't read it for some time. I just pulled it up after our last meeting.
It's actually from the name on the envelope was Mulligan, but it's from the Alumni Association, if I remember right. Is that right?
Well, I'm not sure who the M. Mulligan is. I found that it's a Mary Mulligan, but I don't know the Alumni Association, so I wouldn't know. It's very possible that she's with the Alumni Association. Oh, wait a minute, I take it back. I think the report is from the Alumni Association. So yes, you're right. It was sent by a Mary Mulligan, because I'm just looking at this now. You're right. Yes, and it says the subject is naming the new Central High School. So his nomination was specific to the high school.
And then in the body of the document, it says the high school or a building, if I remember right.
Yeah, it just says on the front page, to the Board of Trustees, subject naming of the new Central High School from Barbara Schaefer Barber, Central Alumni Association. And I'm not a longtime alumni here, so I'm not sure who that is. But I just think it would be unfair for us, since it was received by all the board members, to put it in the hopper.
Thank you, Trustee Cox. Anything further?
That item will come back to the board on the 23rd,
May 26th?
May 26th, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm sorry, Trustee Cox. Was there anything further?
No, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments from any other board member? Thank you. Hearing nothing further, we move on with our agenda. Our next meeting will be held Tuesday, May 26th, 2020, with the 6 p.m. for closed session and 7 p.m. for our public session. And our meeting will once again be held through Zoom, the virtual meeting. We will not be adjourning back into closed session. And so at this time, is there a motion to adjourn today's meeting? I have a motion by Trustee Chan. I have a second by Trustee Solis. All in favor, please say aye or communicate your support to adjourn. Any opposition? Any objections? Thank you, everyone. Have a